Shalom and welcome to another Chamor podcast from abedan, teaching Noahide Judaism for Messianic Hebrews. It is Friday the 20th of December 2024 and I'm going to be going through a little article from our website, the Noahide Judaism Shul, and that's visible here on the screen now. abedan Noahides. Beheading Esau with Messianic Noahide Judaism. Beheading Esau because the head of Esau gains a place in the world to come as long as it's been beheaded, which is the story according to the Baraita concerning the death of Esau at the hand of Hushiel, son of Dan. So this is noahidejudaism.shul, our website. Shul is spelled S-C-H-U-L-E, if you didn't know. Shule. And we're going to look through this article today. Nittel. Okay, so Nittel. And it starts, 'twas the night before Christmas, and all through the fog not a rabbi was stirring, not one synagogue. Now, that might seem a bit strange. You'll find out why as we go along. So, have yourself a Hasmonean Christmas. Far from popular myths about pagan origins of Christmas, many traditions surrounding it actually preserve elements of Hasmonean Judaism related to a 3-day event of darkest winter referred to as the Tekufat of Tevet in the Talmud, originally when the sun enters Capricorn, which had become the Julian Christmas in Christendom until Pope Gregory's 1582 calendar reform forced it to become the Gregorian solstice instead. Did you know that? Did you know that Pope Gregory revised the calendar in 1582? And if it wasn't for him revising the calendar in 1582, the whole world would be following the Julian calendar right now. The Julian calendar is a little bit more accurate with regards to Tekufat Tevet because it is closer to when the sun enters Capricorn. Currently, the sun doesn't really enter Capricorn on the winter solstice because the sidereal year, which is when where it appears that the sun is moving through the zodiac, is not the same length as a tropical year. So we use a tropical year, and that means that in the tropical year, the winter solstice is basically when we return to the point we return to a point or come to a point around the sun where the northern hemisphere is facing far away from the sun. The southern hemisphere is facing to the sun on the winter solstice, and the summer solstice is the opposite of that. Well, that's not how the Jewish calendar was originally described in the Talmud. It was originally to do with when the sun is moving through the zodiacs. Each of those zodiac months was the original months, but things change over centuries, and so things have changed quite a lot, leading to the point that now Tekufat Tevet is no longer at the time as it's described in the Talmud, that is, when the sun enters Capricorn, but is regarded as being the winter solstice instead. And that's been the case since 1582, or gradually from 1582, less than a century it took for most people to accept that. That is when the winter solstice is. That is when the Tekufat Tevet is regarded in Judaism around the world today. So Adam's winter festivities, a little description there, picture of the solstice if you want to understand it more. If you want to know who this saint is down the side here, this is to do with Tevet. This is a picture of Rabbi Saint Simeon Hakalpus, or Simon Kloppus, who is responsible for actually compiling the New Testament according to Judaism. So, one can sometimes hear a Talmudist say that Hanukkah revived observance of an ancient feast mentioned in Avodah Zarah 6a to b, which tells us that an 8-day celebration was originally established before the Tekufat of Tevet, that's 20th of Tevet, by Adam and Eve, following a period of fasting and abstinence the previous year, while the northern hemisphere approached this darkest time of the year. After the Tekufat of Tevet, and Adam and Eve noticed the day got a little bit longer and appointed another 8-day celebration, which is also still respected in Judaism. These celebrations were corrupted by the Romans into Saturnalia, beginning on December the 17th, and Calendar, beginning on December the 25th, respectively. Saturnalia is the pagan form of the Tekufat Tevet, which marks the darkest northern time of the year between Hanukkah and Calendar. It is supposed to have been referred to as Nittel the Yiddish word for Natal as early as Rashi. Rashi is the one who's supposed to first, and as far as we know, use the term Nittel. So the darkest night of the year, which is what we are at today, or just be tonight, I think. Among Eastern Yiddish speakers, the longest night of this darkest time of the year, Saturnalia, goes by a variety of different names, such as Finstere Nacht, Starless Night, Moidrige Nacht, Murderous Night, and Blinde Nacht, Blind Night. In total, there are more than a dozen terms that Yiddish speakers have used to name the Saturnalian time of transition between Hanukkah and calendar, according to the Language and Culture Atlas of Ashkenazi Jewry, the LCAAJ, which we can look at a little bit more later. We won't look at the atlas, but we'll look at some of those terms later. Now, this year, you know that Hanukkah coincides with Christmas exactly, but that's not the way it always was. In the olden days, when the Tekufat of Tevet was tied to the correct time, to the Julian calendar. The Julian Christmas is going to be on the 7th of January, and calendar will have finished. Sorry, that is Hanukkah will have finished by then. And so Hanukkah would have always been before calendar until the calendar was adjusted by Gregory, causing a bit of confusion, but still. So the end of year tithe, the end of the tithe year. The Tekufat of Tevet is also relevant in observing certain commandments, such as setting aside a tithe, that is a tenth of our wealth, according to Deuteronomy chapter 14, verses 22 to 29, with which we are to celebrate a pilgrimage each year. But which pilgrimage? Though never explicitly explained in the Bible, we see that various times of the year, other than the 7 biblical holy days, have also been appointed for it by various rulers. For example, Cheshvan 15th was appointed for the pilgrimage by the wicked Jeroboam. Also, Purim was appointed for a holiday by the Babylonian Jews. Messianic Judaism gave us Hanukkah, which was appointed by a miracle. The law on tithing is clarified by the oral Torah concept of Tu B'Shvat, preparations for which begin during Hanukkah. The idea behind using garlands for Hanukkah and decorating the Hanukkah bush, which influenced the paradise tree ancestor of modern-day Christmas trees, comes from the Hasmonean minhag of tying ribbons around the fruit on the boughs of various fruitful trees before Tu B'Shvat to distinguish Yashan fruit belonging to one tithe year from Hadash fruit which belonged to the next, which also helps us understand Leviticus chapter 23 verse 14 better. Should also mention that in the book of Maccabees, it says specifically that we are to decorate with garlands at this time of the year. So it's very, very ancient biblical tradition to do so. Furthermore, the Shammai-Hillel debate over whether the new year for plants begins either on the 1st or 15th of Shvat might have stemmed from being certain whether the solar Tekufat of Tevet had passed or not. Shammai ruled that it should always be on the 1st of Shvat, even if the solar Tekufat of Tevet had not passed. Hillel permitted it on the 15th of Shvat, guaranteeing that the Tekufat of Tevet would have certainly passed by that time. And here we have an example of a Hanukkah bush. Looks like a Christmas tree, but that's because it's the ancestor of the Christmas tree. Any calendar converter will show that Shammai's new year for plants, the 1st of Shvat in Gregorian 1 BC, when Jupiter stood still after its 9-month journey into Virgo, was December the 25th, corresponding to the Nittel calendar celebration, which follows on immediately after the Tekufat of Tevet. If you want to know more about that, you can go to the website and you can click on the calendar converter there and you can play around with it to find out, and you'll realize that it's absolutely a fact. So, early Christian traditions. And who were the early Christians? Well, they were Messianic Noahides, just like the early Muslims were Messianic Noahides. Both Christianity and Islam derive from one original faith, which was the Messianic Noahide Judaism, which branched off in different ways, one according to Roman culture and one according to Persian culture, and that is why we have two different religions today. Roman culture, ironically, it was the Greek New Testament, but the culture was Latin, and likewise the Quran for the Messianic Noahides in Persia is in Judeo-Arabic, but the culture was Persian. So you get this kind of unusual mixture with both cases. You could call it Perso-Arabic culture versus Greco-Roman culture, I suppose. But the foundational origin of both religions is Messianic Noahide Judaism. Now, evidently, early Messianic Noahides were inspired by some of this Mishnah that we've just been looking at to decorate their paradise trees during the pivotal Tekufat Tevet before the first of Shavat and establish the time between Adam Kadmon's feasts, that is Hanukkah and Calendar, as the saint's day for Adam and Eve. Did you know that? Saint Adam and Saint Eve have a saint's day according to the European church, the traditional churches, and that is December 24th. Of course, putting up the tree for December 24th was originally sort of a symbol of Adam and Eve's hopeful return to being able to eat from the tree of life, having been barred from that. So as a saint's day, the putting up the tree was related to that. December the 24th is the memorial day for Adam and Eve. And that concludes with the calendar proclamation of Midnight Mass, starting an octave of celebrations from December the 25th to January the 1st. So let's look at some more names for this time of year. By far the most common Yiddish term for Tekufat Tevet is nittel, which is not only the most frequent and widespread, but also the only official scholarly Yiddish term for the event once used by Jews throughout Europe. Ignaz Bernstein explains the words derived from the medieval Latin natalis, meaning birth, which is related, of course, to the English word natal, as in the Latin name of the holiday, Natalis Deus Domini, the Lord's birth, which also gave the Italian and Indonesian terms for Christmas being Natale and Natal, respectively. So the Yiddish term is not that different. It's all part of the same family of names for Christmas. The earliest explicit references to the precise term nittel itself appear first in the 13th century work called the Hagahot Maimonot, where the author describes already widespread practices placing the term with Rashi. Hence I said at the beginning that Rashi is the earliest we can place the term with. The second is a work called Hanitzachon, which dates back to the generation of the Rosh, 1250s to 1327, where it also states that nittel refers to the birth of Jesus. Let's move on. Little Pharisee type Joseph there and Mary, little baby Jesus there. Let's go on. Despite the obvious, however, nittel is actually more commonly associated in Judaic tradition with the story of the birth of the New Testament itself. But we'll go into more of that later. That, of course, being the story associated with Rabbi Saint Simeon HaKalpos, Simon Klopas, the compiler of the New Testament. Unlike the term nittel, most other Yiddish words for this pivotal night of the year reflect language distinctive to a particular region. With characteristic precision, the Litvak Pharisees distinguished December the 24th as Vigilie until midnight, which is followed after midnight by Kaleid, being the closest to the original Roman terms Vigilia and Calendar. Some less than Talmudic examples include Rizlech in Ukraine, which is from the Ukrainian Rizdvo, Yolkus in Belarusia, which is from the Belarusian Yolka for Christmas tree, Rojestvo in the Balkans, which is from the Bulgarian Rojestvo Christovo, Korachon in Hungary, from Hungarian Karachoni, and Krichun in Transylvania, which is again from the same related Hungarian word, which is from the Romanian word Crăciun, which is, as I said, from Hungarian. All right, then, Belima. Time to talk about Belima here. Other Yiddish terms for the Tekufat of Tevet are more subversively playful inventions, largely expressive of Jewish fears associated with this time of the year. Goyim Nacht, or Nationalists' Night, is self-explanatory, while Weihnacht, literally Woe Night, which is common among Jews in Alsace, Galicia, and Western Poland, is a pun on Weihnachten, the German term for December the 24th. Beis Geborenish, literally Beis birthing, plays on the Polish Boże Narodzenie. Kratzmach, literally scratch me, is a pun on Christmas among certain Erev Rav Grinches in America. And finally, of course, there's Xmas, which has become very widely used. Indeed, many among the Erev Rav have thought and encouraged enemies of Judaism to think that the core purpose of being Jewish has only ever been to hate a certain historical Jew. In fact, to listen to such people, one would think that Judaism offers nothing else besides that. In their ignorance, such people think that they are making something into nothing without realizing that the belima they achieve for Jesus by their negativity is actually equivalent to identifying him as Hashem in Kabbalah. You can see more information if you get and study passages of the Mishnah and commentaries on Job 26:7, Isaiah 49:7, and Isaiah 53:3. So it's a lose-lose situation for the haters. For according to Yehuda HaHasid, although we must change the name of a Jewish tzaddik, that is a saint, who is worshipped as a patron by Christians, not all Christians do that, but some do, at the same time, we must not consider debasing idolatry and urinating on it, or excreting on it, because that is what was done to Peor, which turned into a heresy, which nearly destroyed Israel. So we don't do that. In other words, we bless those who curse us, we turn the other cheek. That's actually Judaism. You might have thought that's Christianity, but it's actually Mishnaic Talmudic Judaism as well. And Judaism came first. Jesus was just pushing a Talmudic view, a Mishnaic view, an oral Torah view of Judaism, which the Sadducees rejected, which is why the primary target for Jesus' mission was to convert people like Sadducees, while Paul, for example, took the side of the Pharisees and sided with Pharisees against the Sadducees. The Sadducees were the ones who had the real problem. Thus, Christmas is only mocked or belittled among either the most ignorant Jews or secret Jews for Jesus who understand the Kabbalah of Belima. So if you hear somebody mocking, you'll understand, well, they're either totally ignorant or they are secret Jews for Jesus because they understand the Kabbalah of Belima. Other traditions, besides Adam's feast, Hanukkah, tithing, and Belima, there are also several other matters associated with the Tekufat of Tevet itself in Pharisee tradition, concerning which all serious Talmudim are required to be familiar. So, that is Tekufat Tevet tragedy, for example. For example, although the Hanukkah miracle clearly happened in a year when the Tekufat of Tevet was after the end of the second of Tevet, the tragedies of the 9th of Tevet, that's the murder of Rav Simon Kalpas, Syrian Klopas HaTzadik, and the 10th of Tevet, the breach of Jerusalem, in different years were also associated with that same darkest time of the year in the North Turanian hemisphere. The darkness of this darkest northern time of the year had an effect on Jephthah as well. Jephthah, as the day he sacrificed his daughter. If you can get a commentary on that. You get the proof of that from Adurahim, Sha'ar HaTekufot, page 122a in the Venice edition, published 1566. The darkness of Tekufat Tevet was also manifest yet again in the sin of Yossel Ponrik, which is Joseph's Panderer, on that particular night. There's the sacrifice there. Celibacy. Hence, another Yiddish term for Tekufat Tevet is Yosselsnacht or Yoselnacht, night of Joseph. Not me, not this Yossi, a different Yossi. In reference to Yossel Ponrik's sin, i.e., to the conception of Ben Stada, the Yiddish version of Krampus. The latter's mother, Miriam Magdala, that's Mary Magdalene, was supposed to have been raped by the Romanized reveler Yossel Ponrik on the Tekufat of Tevet, implying Ben Stada's birth almost 9 months later in 29 or 32 CE on Yom Kippur, as promoted by many Notzrim. And when I say Notzrim, I don't mean Christians, I mean proper Notzrim, who secretly do things against the Lord. Thus, it came to be believed that children conceived on Joiselsnacht can easily be spiritually corrupted, as was Ben Stadder, so a tradition of celibacy on this night emerged. It was also therefore important to keep away from anything like alcohol, which might lead to sexual relations on that night, since any child conceived during the Tekufat of Tevet was sure to be cursed and grow up to be a tool of the evil inclination, just like Ben Stadder was. Persecutions, we should know a little bit more about that too. Concern over the potency of winter's darkness had also passed from Jews into Christian tradition, both in direct contrast to the drunken debauchery of the Romans and other pagans. From late antiquity, the Tekufat of Tevet was a time when such maleficent forces made even the prayer houses of Abrahamic believers, Jew and Christian alike, into special targets for persecution by the Romans during Saturnalia. Hence the Talmudic prohibition against eulogizing during Hanukkah, and the Hasidic saying that dogs, a symbol of Rome or Esau, appear to those who study in the Beit Midrash on this night. Yoisel's sin encapsulates a memory of the effects of Roman imperialism suffered not only among Jews but also by early Christians, and which continued even after Rome's conversion. Christians who did not toe the imperial line continued to be persecuted as heretics together with Jews, now accused of deicide, for 12 centuries. Although Luther and Calvin's attitudes were far from conciliatory to Jews, the Reformation brought on an appreciation for Hebraic ideas as increasing numbers of Christians rose up against various heavy-handed Roman-like authorities. And although Poland's official stance was tolerance at that time, in Cossack areas things soon got so bad for Jews on December the 24th that a Russian Jewish saying emerged that if one sticks a knife into the earth on December 24th, blood will pour out because of the violence associated with that night. Closing the synagogues and staying at home on Tekufat of Tevet amid rowdy anti-Semites was a reasonable response to such terror. So we have another tradition of abstinence. One who fasts on Tekufat Tevet is considered to have fasted for all such tragedies. Hence, we also find concerning the 9th of Tevet, which is tied to the murder of Rav Simon Klopas Hatzadik, that it had at least once been misunderstood, not as due to Tekufat Tevet, but due to the fact that Otto Aish, often referenced to Ben Stadder, was conceived on that night, according to Haggahat of Tosafot Yeshanim, in the name of Gadol Echad, brought in the Tosafot of some editions of the Shulchan Aruch on chapter 580, and that's in the Machen Yerushalayim Friedman edition, though removed from regular editions due to the error. Until very recently, Christians also opposed the pagan Roman corruption of Adam's monotheistic celebration into Saturnalian drunken debauchery by acknowledging Adam's winter fast. They had the Advent nativity fast, which is almost unheard of these days except in Orthodox circles or in religious communities. The earliest Messianic Noahides used to observe the whole period up to the shepherd's candle of joy as a fast which, as the sects of Christianity and Islam evolved from them, became respectively the Advent Nativity Fast and Ramadan before the invention of the Islamic calendar messed up the timing. If you want more information of that, you can look at Fazlur Rahman Sheikh's Chronology of Prophetic Events in the appendix, and it'll show you that Ramadan always corresponded with this time of the year in those days, in the early days, before the calendar was changed. And that is it corresponded all throughout the life of the alleged prophet of Islam, Muhammad, who's actually Hanzala. Throughout every year of his life, that's when Ramadan was, until after he died. 6 years after he died, they changed the calendar. As mentioned, the end of Kislev was associated with Adam's precursor to Hanukkah and Saturnalia. While a fast during Kislev was observed among the first century Romantic Jews like Jesus of Nazareth himself, and you can see that in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 4, beginning of chapter 4, as discussed in a different article on this channel, it didn't survive in Babylonian sects. This is because the Babylonian sect prohibited fasting during Hanukkah, which from 1582 often overlapped with the Tekufat of Tevet and soon eclipsed the memory of the earlier festive fast of Adam and Eve, which was only preserved in the Jerusalem minhag and mostly among Messianic Noahides. So it was because of the change of the calendar that the fast of Tevet eventually dropped because Kislev now was corresponding to the Tukufat of Tevet instead of Tevet fast. Instead, a new form of abstinence associated with Tukufat Tevet emerged among Jews. So what did we do instead? Once the calendar had been changed in 1582, we started to fast in a different way. It's called Bitul Torah. Yet another folk etymology for nittel speculates that the name actually stems from the Yiddish term nit, nothing, in reference to the practice of Bitul Torah, ceasing the Torah study on December 24th. Jews usually study Torah almost every night, which is believed to strengthen creation. But the dark history of the tragedies on the Tukufat of Tevet led to the belief that even religious sparks generated by Torah study to nourish the universe may actually feed the elemental force of winter darkness at this time of the year. In an effort to spiritually reduce the power of winter, many Jews began to abstain from Torah study at Tukufat Tevet. The power of winter is so strong on December 24th that if you study Torah on the eve before midnight, its power would be stolen by the other side. But without Torah learning, it is believed there is less power in the elemental forces of the universe. Hence, Bittul Torah, usually an act of mourning, was a mystical calculus to weaken the Tukufat of Tevet. This also led to yet another etymology for nittel, from nittel, for it was removed, that is nital, from the world, suggesting the destruction of evil by the triumph of Rabbi Simon's Evangelion. Two things. The wickedness of the Ben Stada's movement among the Notzrim was removed when Rabbi Simon constructed the Evangelion, the New Testament, and also the power of darkness is removed from the world by not studying Torah on that particular night. It sounds strange, and surely studying Torah would be a positive thing. But since there was so much bad happening over the centuries when Jews are studying Torah on that night, it started to be thought that perhaps even the negative forces are getting power from Torah study. So if we stop Torah study on this night, then we will not feed the negative forces, but we'll cause the negative forces to be starving, and then they'll be weakened, and then there won't be so much danger for Jews. And so that's how the tradition of Bittul Torah began. Furthermore, nittel rhyming with bittul is often taught as an acronym for nicht Torah lernen, a reference to the hiatus on Torah study. In Jewish circles, refraining from Torah study at the madras on nittel became popular as a way of avoiding unwanted attention and reducing the chances of inviting violence against them. In a metaphorical sense, at least, Bittul Torah had been proven to limit the strength of those who sought to hurt the Jewish lives. Besides, nittel was a night where impurities reigned supreme, and therefore Torah study, the most sacred of activities, would not be appropriate on such a night. Apostate Jews who converted to Christianity in the 16th century are not known to have mentioned the practice of Bittul Torah for nittel in their anti-Jewish polemics, which in and of itself indicates that they did not know about it. The requisite conclusion is that even if the apostates were from extremely irreligious backgrounds, the practice was not universally popular at that time. The earliest reference to Bittul Torah is from the second half of the 17th century in Kutzur Halachot, a text by Rabbi Yair Chaim Bachrach called Mekor Hayim. There we have the first known reference to the practice in rabbinical writing being a single line in an index of Rabbi Yair Bachrach's book where it says, and the practice of cancelling Torah study on Christmas. Sadly, what he actually wrote about the practice has been lost, and this is only 30-something years after the calendar reform. So we see that it starts to come into practice after the reform of the Gregorian calendar. To practice Bittul Torah, some would go to sleep in the early evening, but others stayed awake, fearing that they might dream about Torah study. Such rabbis would certainly have preferred visions of sugar plums dancing in their heads. Bittul Torah at Christmas was not generally practiced by Litvak Pharisees, But so as not to worry Jews who did, most Pharisees did not sleep on Nittel until after lighting a candle at midnight for a little Torah study before going to bed. After all, it would reflect badly in heaven for Jews to sleep soundly throughout the night while the Gentiles were up in their places of worship praying to God. The Litvak Pharisee practice of lighting a candle at midnight for Torah study sessions soon spread, whereby even some whose tradition was to sleep would arise at midnight and light a candle for a little Torah study. In some communities, the custom was to either study Torah in one's mind or, since, as the sages teach us, one's personal familiarity with Torah content does not, in and of itself, define one's religiosity, rather one's actions and emotions are the significant part of one's religious self. While we refrain from Torah learning, one could invest in other religious practices, namely acts of loving kindness and charity. Well, there's more to look at, but we're not going to do that right now. We're going to stop. And I'm going to wish you all a good afternoon, a Shabbat Shalom. There's a Shabbat Shalom from Tim Brang. And I'll continue the rest of this after Shabbat for you. So God bless you, Tim Brang. Thanks for popping along. Shabbat Shalom, he says. Blessed Sabbath to everyone. And the same to you. I hope you will have a happy and holy Sabbath and will be interested in learning more about the Jewish Christmas afterwards. See you on Sunday for after Havdalah. Shabbat Shalom.